So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for giving me a little time on the agenda today. I know you got an important thing talking to God's Street, God's country. So I know it's I know a lot of you here to discuss that, but I appreciate the time because you know, at the beginning of every session, over the last couple sessions, I like to come to all the neighborhood groups in my districts, from the north end down to the south end, and everything in between, and just give a little update on what I filed legislatively. This isn't every bill that I filed, but this is a good chunk of what I filed. And just to give you an understanding of what some of the issues that I've been working on, that I'm going to be working on this coming session, and also just to, you know, if you have any questions or concerns or comments, you know, I'm happy to take some questions after the fact, and also just open it up for any questions on anything, you know, related to the legislative process that we're going to be going through over the next 2 years. You know, at the top, it's obviously the ways to get in contact with me, whether through email, you know, on social media. You know, I try to be as active as possible in returning, you know, people, whether they're tweeting me or stuff like that. So by all means, don't hesitate to do that. But I want to highlight a couple of the pieces that I filed, and then first and foremost is the short-term residential rentals legislation that I filed a couple weeks ago. And you know, basically, it is something that we are, in terms of regulating and taxing the short-term rental industry, which is, when we say short-term rentals, we are talking about anything that is under 30 days, so not, you know, not a typical, you know, even tenant at will lease, anything that's under 30 days, and anything that is done on an online portal. You know, the most popular one, the most well-known one is Airbnb, that everyone knows about, but there are many others. There's Stay Alfred, there is, you know, there's a whole host of number ones, and then there are also things that we learned going forward, that there are ones that are dealing with corporate housing as well. And if you remember, I filed something 2 years ago at the same time period, and at the time we really didn't have much of an understanding of the industry. Councilor Martina and myself had been talking and working on this, you know, one from the city and me from the state, in terms of dealing with this, because obviously it was something that we were getting a lot of phone calls and interest, especially in the north end, where people were renting out units, you know, next door to people, and people were just concerned and not understanding what, you know, what was actually going on. You know, this industry, even in the last 2 years, has exploded, and it has become a huge component of, you know, of the travel hospitality industry. You know, a lot of people use it as an alternative to hotels. I actually personally did it myself back in August to try to see how it worked out when I went out to LA for a trip, and you know, I did it for a couple of days, and it was interesting. You know, I don't know if I'll do it again. I haven't made that determination. You are staying in someone's house. So there is some you know, differences in terms of a hotel, but it is you know, a new way of traveling, a new way of doing business, a new way of generating tourism in the Commonwealth, in the city of Boston, and in our neighborhood individually. But it's a completely unregulated industry. There is no regulations basically around that right now, and also you have a company like Airbnb that is you know, making $1 billion company that is, at least in the Commonwealth, not being taxed 1 cent. And so, you know, when you're comparing it to hotels, where hotels are being taxed at 11.5% in the city of Boston and with the Commonwealth, you know, there's obviously some inequities that need to somewhat be, you know, changed or evened out to some degree. So what we try to do is, and with our legislation, the key component of this is, in comparison to what we filed 2 years ago, is that we're actually showing that there are different business models that are taking place throughout this industry. You have maybe the small homeowner that wants to rent out a room in their home, or you know, in their condo, or even just rent out their condo a couple of times a year. We put that in a particular category that we call the residential hosts, and that is where the unit must be the host primary residency. And they cannot rent out the unit more than 60 days per year. That's the line, the threshold that we're creating. If you go over the 60 days per year, we perceive you to be more than now not just a residential, but you're actually running a business, and you are in the commercial host category. Also, you're in the commercial host category if you are renting out units that aren't the ones you are not living in. So if you are renting out units, which is happening all across the city, and you are you know, you're never living a day in there, and you're just turning it over continuously on these websites. We consider you now a commercial host and not necessarily a residential host, much more higher threshold of entry. The last piece is professionally managed host, which is more of the corporate housing component, which is, again, something that we didn't necessarily know about 2 years ago. The corporate housing business, especially in Boston, is a huge component, and these are the people that are renting out units that are less than 30 days, but definitely more than a typical 1 or 2 day stay that you would have if someone was traveling to the city. They typically are like when you have the movie production companies come in to do some filming for a couple weeks, or over a week or whatever. They rent out. They'll have people, whether it's the people that are working on the production crew or the people that are actually starring in the film. They'll have them rent out a unit or such. You also have people that are coming from out of town to do business, like with John Hancock, to do a project management company, a project management issue, or like you're having someone coming in like to go to MGH to get treatment for some type of treatment that they can get at MGH they can't get anywhere else. Obviously, we have many of the best hospitals in the country, and so those type of things we put into the professionally managed hosts, which are corporate housing or other similar renters, and they have rental management systems in place, and they are the units that are offered for rent at a minimum of 5 nights a week. So that's obviously a different category than the the one or two night person that's coming in here to rent out. We mandate that the rentals be up to code, whether it's fire, electrical, safety matters. The rentals would pay state and local taxes, and they would be tiered depending on what your which category you fall into. We're keeping the baseline of the hotel tax which is 11 in the city of Boston, which is 11.5%. For the residential, we go lower because we see it as a smaller homeowner that wants to do offset some of their income, and we go less on the taxes for them because we figure that they're the ones that are the ones that don't need it, or need the protection a little bit more, and we go higher on the commercial rate, because those are the ones at the end of the day that are eating up our housing stock and the ones that are affecting our community individually more. We also earmark that if a city or town decides to take that commercial funding or any of the funding, because basically we set a baseline of state taxes, and we add the local option to go higher, depending on, similar to what the hotel tax does. And if on the commercial rate, if the city or town decides to take the tax incentive of the additional taxes, they then have to earmark 50% of that money directly to low income and moderate income housing. Again, it's eating up most of the housing. That's the type of stuff that's eating up the housing stock more dramatically, and that's the type of stuff that we want to kind of offset by allocating some of that funds to directly go to the city or town to be able to offset some of those housing issues that these things have been creating. The bill would also mandate rentals to have a minimum of about $1 million of liability insurance. That is basically typically taken on by the online portal. That's basically Airbnb's insurance policy that they've had over the last 2 or 3 years that they've continued to use. And so most online portals have that type of insurance mechanism that for them to kick in. The last piece that's not on here, but I know with working with Councilwoman Tina and working with the mayor's office, is we give the cities and towns flexibility to go further if they choose to. Linfield, for instance, had a shooting in their Airbnb. What was it, like the spring of last year? Spring of last year, there was a shooting in an Airbnb. Linfield then came out and said, "Hey, we want to ban these altogether. We don't want to have any Airbnbs. We don't want to have any short-term rentals at all." If the city or town wants to do that by this legislation, they can go ahead and do that. If they want to make it more restrictive, if they want to lower the amount of days that becomes residential host to make it 30 days, to make it even more, the city or town can do that. But we're trying to set the baseline for regulations and taxation and allow the cities and towns to be able to add on to that if they choose to. We tried to give the cities and towns as much flexibility as possible, with obviously creating some of the consumer protection and safety measures that we believe need to be in place for this industry to continue to grow and to thrive going forward. Because right now, again, it is completely unregulated and is going to lead down to some has already led to a lot of problems in our neighborhood individually, across the city itself. But we definitely need to make sure that these regulations are strong, but also allow the industry to continue to grow. And I think that we've tried to find that balance. This is the beginning of a conversation for a 2-year legislative cycle, so we'll see where that goes. governor filed something that was related to taxes but not to regulation. There was a couple bills in the Senate that were filed related to taxes but not regulation. My belief is if we want to do taxes on this, it's the regulation piece is just as not, if not more important to protecting the communities that I personally represent, and I know a lot of my colleagues do as well. That's a short-term rental. I can open up the questions on that piece.
Whatever you want to do.
It's up to we can go there and then we can go to the next stage. Oh, do Councilman?
Yeah, sure.
Just a quick question. So, Aaron, you mentioned that unregulated industry. How does one determine how does the state oversight determine when someone crosses from residential to commercial, that line? Is there a system or
they have to register? They have to register by our legislation.
Okay.
They will have to register with the state, with DOR, the ones that handle the taxes, similar to what the way the mechanism that the hotel registers with the state in terms of taxes, and they will have to provide the online portals have to provide the information in terms of clarification on, like, let's say you rented out your place 30 days a year, and you did it on Airbnb. Airbnb would have that information, that data. They would have to share that with the Commonwealth through that process to determine that they line up with whichever host category they choose to line up to.
So it's the online portal that's automatically telling the state this person's 61 nights, not 60, and automatically that person's going into commercial as opposed to residential. Okay.
We also, another point on the registration, which I've had some pushback from some of the companies on, but we believe that transparency is important here in allowing people to know what's going on, not just in their neighborhood, but like in some cases in their own building. Where if you own a building and a tenant of yours is doing this online, right now there's no mechanism to figure that out unless you're chasing it online, or you're chasing the people with the strollers in the hallway. There's no way really to understand exactly who's doing what. By this legislation, by registering with the state, and I know the city's talking about doing a registration piece as well, which is obviously certainly important. Within this bill, we want the cities and towns to be able to do that as well. You have a clear case to understand who's doing what and for how many days, that way, if you have someone in your building that's doing this, you have a knowledge of what's going on. The building owner can sort itself out. The building owner can make a decision on how they want to do it, or the condo association, in many instances, can decide what they want to do.
But how would you find that out?
Through registering in DOR.
And so you can pop in on a database and wonder, is anyone in my building running an Airbnb?
Well, the exact mechanism of how you would do it, we leave the DOR to decide. I don't know if it would be on a database necessarily, but it's something similar, I guess. Yeah. George?
Any protection for landlords? Where regulation, you're talking about regulation, you have somebody living in your building, somebody renting an apartment in your building, all of a sudden they decide that they want to profit from your property, they want to profit from your real estate tax, you want to profit for the upkeep of the property, you want to profit from the insurance you have. Any regulation in this that protects the owner of the property?
Creating the transparency is the key.
But what about guaranteeing ownership?
As a building owner, you make the determination through your lease with the tenant.
I understand, but as your added regulations, something that's going to profit, the city of Boston, the state of Massachusetts is going to profit from it too. Okay, so now we're talking about modern enterprise. Okay, that's what Airbnb is, modern enterprise, let's say. All right, now within all that regulation, okay, with all the burdens that are already put on landlords, why doesn't the regulation include safety nets for the landlord?
Well, by creating a transparency of having to register, now the landlord will know what's going on. You make the determination as the landlord whether you want that type of...
But the apartment is not theirs to rent. How the hell do they...
That's your choice, yeah.
No, but why isn't it included in the legislation?
Because if the landlord wants to do it, then we have to give them the flexibility and freedom to allow their tenant to do that if they choose to. It's up to the landlord's decision. We put it in the building. I had a building owner in this neighborhood talk to me. When I was first doing my research on this, and they had a number of Airbnbs being rented out, and the guy had no idea that was taking place.
Wow.
And I think that's a huge problem that needs to, I think the best way to do it, I'm open to suggestions on furthering that, but I think the best way to do it is to make sure that that person, whoever's renting it out, they can't rent out on these online portals unless they actually register with the state, which at the end of the day allows the building owner or the condo association, in these condo buildings to make that choice.
My question is on legislation, when so much is there to protect the consumer, okay? So much is there to protect the individual. 11% revenue increase for the cities and states, plus liberty to add more to it. Why isn't there legislation that says simply, in order to lease your rented space, to put your rented space on Airbnb, you need the approval of your landlord. In that way, in the dispute between a landlord and a tenant, which you know how it is.
Well, there's a notification point in terms of if the building owner gets.
Yeah, notifying the state or the city.
No, notifying the landlord.
You have it in your.
Notifying
I
the
think
building
that if you're
owner.
going to do all that
Yeah.
work to protect communities,
Yeah.
okay, you should start with the people that also make up the communities, which are the landlords, you know what I mean? Because we own the properties, we own the land, we own the buildings, we pay the taxes, we're the people that you come off to if there's a problem. We're to answer to the fire department, the building department, and all of the departments that we need to answer to, and all of the regulation, all the taxes, and the upkeep, and the snow shoveling, all that stuff. There should be something there on the legislation that protects landlords.
I think we are protecting
I'm not
landlords.
reading too much into it, but I'm sure there's enough.
I think we're
force in it
protecting landlords.
to make it look like
By doing
switches.
this. I think
Because very rarely does the state or the city take time to protect those who own.
I will get you the legislation, you can look at it. I think you'll be happy to know we are protecting landlords through this legislation. I think by doing nothing right now, I think we are keeping landlords vulnerable. I think by doing something.
No, I agree completely.
I think by doing something.
Plenty of landlords in the
Yeah.
neighborhood who all of a sudden are wondering and scratching their head, thinking, why the hell did my water bill just quadruple?
Yeah.
And I know plenty of tenants will sit in their apartment feeling that they are safe in their building when they're looking out the hallway because they heard a troop of people walking up. And you got people coming in with bags like they're concierge. And the ridiculous part of Airbnb is that you're paying the same fees you're paying in a hotel. Without the safety, without the proper egress, without the concierge, without security, without all that stuff. So, it's kind of like hippie living in the 2017. That's what it is. Let me rent you my bed, so I can make a profit. Nevertheless, what I find is that with all this search for regulation, with conversations I have with other landlords in the neighborhood, okay, we're being taken advantage of. You have a parasite living in your property who decides to have a symbiotic relationship with you that you don't know about, where they profit further from what you have than they do.
George, I don't disagree with you. That one of our primary goals in this thing is to make sure that landlords, building owners know what's going on in the building so they can make a determination on how they want to
be that if you're going to evict that person, you don't have to go through the crazy eviction process that the city of Boston demands. I mean, that's your, Airbnb in your apartment without the knowledge of your landlord should be immediate throw you out at the end of the month.
Well, it's
It shouldn't be something that you have
breaking
to-
the lease.
that you have-
That's in
It's
your
breaking the lease. It's not having a 6-month argument with somebody or a year argument with somebody to throw them out. Because right now it's kind of lopsided. They do have more rights than the owners of the property.
I appreciate that. We're trying to do our best to figure that out.
A couple questions. Along George's line of questioning, so it would be okay to include some language in every lease saying that this kind of rental is barred?
You can do that today.
Yeah, we do it already. I do it already.
And it's smart. I mean, if you don't want it issuing, I would suggest you do it now.
The issue is that there's no way to actually know unless you catch them. Really? So that's what this legislation, unless I'm wrong,
Yeah.
tends to correct a little bit on. I think
Well,
that's-
the way to catch them for those who have their own property is to periodically check on Airbnb and see if your apartment is showing up as a rental. You know what I mean? I pointed it out to Bobby Colomino. He used to own a place on North Bennett Street. By the way, the folks who developed that property never came up in front of the neighborhood. They were just going to paint, and they turned tiny 2-bedroom apartments into 3-bedroom apartments. Okay? Lady on the 4th floor was renting the apartment Airbnb. All right? Bobby's going nuts. He's trying to figure out why the hell is my water bill skyrocketing. Again, the woman didn't live there. Her mother lived down the street. Okay? She wasn't from the North End. She rented the apartment as many times a week as possible. She put as many beds as she could put in the place, and the showers were going on endlessly. All right? Who protects Bobby? I mean, Bobby's paying taxes to the city of Boston. You know? Is it being protected? No, there's no protection. The protection is
That's what we're trying to bring.
But that's what I'm saying. There should be a strong
Yep.
part of the lease, which protects the landlords, many of who are elderly. Bobby's mother owned the building before she sold it. She's in her 80s, who are becoming victims of people who are here to profit off the hard labor of others.
I think you're,
It's that simple.
you're hurt, but I want to, Phil sounded like he had a few more, so I don't want to.
No.
Just about, you mentioned that the buildings have to be up to code. I mean, obviously, in a neighborhood like this, there's several levels of grandfathering. Some buildings have sprinklers, others don't. Would it have to be something that's up to like a modern sprinkled building? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it would be basically what we say in the mechanism of accepting the additional revenue. The city or town has to create a standard, a safety standard, and they can tailor that probably to whatever, the grandfathering and, I mean, because again, Boston is different than other parts of Boston. Boston's different than other parts of the state, but then even in different neighborhoods, it's going to be different from Boston to do individually. So we give them that ability to continue to do, but what they were doing, but in the sense of annual inspection. We have to get annually inspected by our legislation. By whatever, in Boston it would be the ISD department. And so we make sure that there's an annual inspection. I think we've had some pushback on that because that might be, to some people that's overburdensome. I think we're still working on trying to figure that out. So.
Anyone else in the council? Let's briefly open it up here.
Would that be the same inspection as like the rental registration inspection with ISD?
I think they could roll that in together. If the unit's already been up on as a host. Yeah. I think they can roll them together.
I just want to say thank you, because I had that going on in my building, and we had to fight with the landlord. And it just so happened in our condo docs that he wasn't allowed to do it. He wasn't allowed to treat the condo like a hotel, and that's how we got him to stop. But he's still threatening to sue us, so he can continue to do it. And to have someone come in your building every other day with the key to the front door, and he put a numbers lock on his, so they never had a key for his, it was just numbers, was very, very unsettling. So now that you're doing this, we might have more of an argument against him that he won't be able to take us to court and actually fight for him to profit on something that's my home where I live, and I have people going in and out all hours of the night. So thank you.
No, thank you for the kind words. This is my number one priority legislatively for this session. It was a priority last session, but it was still something that a lot of stuff needed to get flushed out discussion-wise. We think we've kind of tried to find the right balance here. In terms of allowing, if people want to do this, letting them do it, but as long as they're getting the proper checks and balances to make sure that it's okay and that they're having the proper liability insurance and that they're up to code and everything. And I think that we're still not there yet. It's still a work in progress. I don't know where it's going to go. I've been working with Sal and obviously working with the mayor's office, and I think we're all in line here to try to find the right proper solution of correcting some of these issues that we've faced. And again, the reason why me and Sal were working on it a lot, because we were getting the first phone calls. No one else in the state was getting phone calls like this, and I didn't have the answers when we were first getting these phone calls from people. Now it's taken off, and it's all over the state, and it's all over the country. I mean, it's a huge, all over the world. It's a huge thing, and we have to kind of, some cities and towns have been able to tackle it. Some states have been able to tackle it. I think that we've done something here, at least from what we filed, that is different, has some components from what other states have done, but is different. There's no model here that I think you can point to that is the right way to do it. I think we're still learning as we go.
I know if anybody else has other questions, then we certainly welcome the emails and things, but I think he has 6 more items on his.
I'm not going to go through all 6.
Okay, I just wanted to give you time to
Yeah, no, I'm not going to go through all 6, but I just wanted to point out number 4, which is we believe that there needs to be better regulation concerning sex offenders. In particular, ones that are registering in shelters. I'm blessed to have 3 shelters in my district. St. Francis House, Pine Street Inn, and the Veteran Shelter. They do such tremendous work and provide such a service to our city that I'm a big supporter of theirs and try to help them out any way I possibly can with it, whether it's through funding and whatnot. But there is obviously a continued issue of where sex offenders are by law are able to register at homeless shelters, and then basically it gives them almost, I don't want to say, it gives them a lot more freedom to be able, because they're obviously homeless, so they don't have to be there all the time, and they're at the end of the day, we've had some issues. We had one particular terrible incident that took place in the South End related to someone who was a level 3 sex offender and got released a couple months later while registered at the Pine Street Inn, ended up raping 2 women in the South End, and so it's obviously, and in the same breath, you have sex offenders and you want to try to help them get back, readjust into society in a proper way, but you have to make sure that that we're doing it the right way. And so we tried to we filed a couple bills that were related to that, in particular with the Department of Public Safety, to ask them to try to come up with real guidelines on how to have the discharging of level 3 sex offenders at homeless shelters. Right now, there's no guidelines. People talk about unregulated in terms of there's no real guidelines surrounding this, in terms of how they're supposed to do it. And what I've witnessed, again, having served now for 8 years in this capacity and representing Pine Street Inn, is that you would have people at different types of sheriff's departments across the Commonwealth, and I don't know how much this is going on anymore, but they were literally taking out their prisoners and just driving them when they got released, and then just driving them down to the Pine Street Inn and just dropping them off, and just saying here, best of luck kind of thing. And that's not the way, especially when it comes to sex offenders, that's not the way that people should be getting acclimated into society. And I think we really need to come up with some real strong guidelines on how that can be. I don't have all the answers on that necessarily, but I think that we need to have that conversation and have the Department of Public Safety kind of take the lead on that. So that's why we filed them, to try to get them to formulate some conversation. The other thing the second bill would clarify how sex offenders register with local police, mandating that they check in within 30 days of being released from custody. This is tightening kind of the language that currently exists, and we feel it's necessary because of some of the incidents that we've seen, over the last couple of years. And again, this is personal because it's because of my district, and in terms of just obviously, the large component of the homeless population gravitates to downtown Boston, and so we want to do our best to try to help those people as much as possible, but in particular with the level 3 sex offenders, I think we need to have some more clarification.
Aaron, does any of your legislation speak to, I guess, where sex offenders sometimes claim they live? For example, public safety meeting a couple months ago, Boston Police will outright tell you that there are a number of people who say they live at a homeless shelter, but they're actually living in the suburbs. But they don't want their neighbors to know that they're sex offenders. So they pick a homeless shelter and say, that's where I live. Homeless shelter gets a bad rap. Meantime, this guy or female is living in the suburbs, sex offender, no one knows about it because they've planned a different location for where they're registered.
Right, and I think that we've talked to the homeless shelters about how to better manage that in terms of who's there and who's not there, and I think they're on board with it. I think they need clarification on what they can and can't do. The trouble with Pine Street in particular is that because of the federal dollars that they accept, they have to by law accept anybody that comes to their door. They cannot turn anybody away. I don't want to speak for the veteran shelter. And St. Francis House is a day shelter for the most part. There is some long-term housing in there, but it's for the most part a day shelter. That presents challenges that make it very difficult to manage in terms of who's coming in, who's coming out. I do believe we did legislation. I want to say in 2008. It was before I got elected, and that mandated that people that level 3 sex offenders that register at homeless shelters had to wear GPS bracelets. That was thrown out by the courts. That was deemed unconstitutional by the courts, and that has never really been approached since because of that court ruling. And it only lasted for about 6 months, I want to say, before the courts threw it out.
Sean, just getting back to Sean's point, Dan Toscano, 78 French Street. If you put down an address you're not living at, that's a violation of the statute, and it's a crime. It carries up to 2.5 years in house corrections. If it's a subsequent offense, it's actually a felony that carries up to 5 years. I think Department of Corrections, and I'm not sure the Suffolk County, if you're just being held on an offense and not doing a sentence, if you're doing a sentence before you're released, if you're a sex offender, you have to fill out paperwork that I think you have to register within 48 hours at wherever you're going. If you're homeless sex offender, you have to register in person every 30 days at the local police department. But it is an offense, I mean, if they catch them, you know?
Well, that's the big if, because Boston Police will tell you it happens all the time, that
Yeah.
people are living in the suburbs, but registering at homeless shelters, there's really nothing they can do about it. So, anyway.
I mean, we'd like to see it tightened as much as possible, so, you know, I think that's where, what we're trying, at least to try to get those conversations moving in a more positive direction in terms of that. So, open up to any other questions or comments or anything, you know, in front of us.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize